Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of NB8 right here on Wood TV Plus. Phil Pinarski joined, as always, by AJ Evans. AJ, we have a ton to talk about, and no less, of course, is the fact that the Pistons are in the midst of a pretty difficult stretch right now. We'll break down the past couple of games post-All-Star break, and also what's on the slate coming up, because it is a doozy for Detroit. We'll also spend a little bit of time talking about the big conversation at hand with the NBA right now, and that is the issue of tanking. Teams have been tanking to try and maybe get higher draft picks. You know, the NBA, of course, doesn't want teams to completely give up on games and winning them during this season, even after some teams may have already been eliminated. We'll touch on maybe some ideas that the NBA is going to be playing around with, and maybe even some ideas that we've got to fix that tanking issue. And of course, you know, Team USA won a bunch of gold medals, namely being, of course, you know, the men's and women's hockey teams. And that kind of got us thinking, you know, a little bit forward into the 2028 Summer Olympics and USA basketball. Who's going to be on that roster? We've got sort of our dream lineups for that upcoming Olympic Games. Again, just a little under or about 2 years away from those games. So again, teams are starting to maybe start thinking about who they want to invite to practice and maybe even join that team. But we'll get into all that in just a little bit. We, of course, want to start talking about the Detroit Pistons, still atop the Eastern Conference, still one of the top teams, if not the top team in the entire NBA. And they really showed it during this recent stretch. Let's kind of go over just the past couple of games, AJ. Let's start with the big one post All-Star break. That was against the New York Knicks. And just like all season, what we've seen so far, the Pistons kind of handed the Knicks a loss there pretty handedly. They won, the Pistons won 126 to 111. Safe to say, AJ, that the Pistons still top team in the East, no doubt about it.
Yeah, what a win that was, Phil. Everyone always talks about all of the guys who performed so well in Madison Square Garden, and Cade really shined in that game. He had 42 points, 13 assists, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks. The thing that impressed me the most in that game, though, was I felt like he was the aggressor. Right. He really wanted to assert himself from the jump, and I felt like he did that. But yeah, that was just another commanding victory over a really talented New York team that I think continues to just raise question marks as the season has progressed. This was supposed to be the team to beat out of the East, and there's still a long way to go and plenty of season left ahead for these teams that'll be in the playoffs. But as of right now, Detroit still is reigning at the top.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we both kind of picked New York to go to the finals in our preseason predictions, and, you know, seeing just Detroit, how dominant they've been. You got to think that last year's playoff matchup kind of is playing into this, because it's not like Detroit is keeping it close. I mean, they're really blowing out the Knicks every time they play. And you even heard some of the commentators during the game just say how aggressive they were being, how tough that defense for Detroit is. And again, I think there is that budding rivalry. I think it's already here, but I know people are still going to use the budding word.
Yeah, for sure. It's also too just it's gotten so entertaining because I felt like the Knicks really prided themselves on being the tougher team, being the toughest team in the East. They really, I felt like, embraced that identity under Tom Thibodeau. And now that Mike Brown is there, I think they're still a relentless and extremely tough team, but the Pistons are really wearing that identity now, and they're the ones who are always looking to land the first punch against anyone, but especially New York.
Yeah, and I love just watching games at Madison Square Garden in general, especially if you are rooting for that team playing the Knicks, because you just see all the celebrities in the crowd, just like as soon as Cade really started turning it on in that game. Again, you mentioned he had 42 points in that one. When he really started turning it on, I think they cut to Spike Lee, John McEnroe in the front row, just going, oh my goodness. And it was just amazing to see. Again, Cade, definitely an all-star, and still an MVP candidate, I think. And a lot of people he started to pick up momentum a little bit too. And AJ, I was looking at some of the other potential MVP candidates right now, and I've got to say, a lot of them have missed a lot of time already. I mean, you look at SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's one of them. He could only miss 6 more games, and he's still dealing with that oblique injury. Luka Doncic, another one who's having a phenomenal season. He can only miss 5 more games the rest of the way. Otherwise, he doesn't meet that 65-game threshold to even qualify as MVP. Victor Wembanyama, another guy who had a great game last night. We'll get into that in just a little bit. He could only miss 4 more games, and Nikola Jokic, who I picked to be my MVP, he only can miss 1 more game. Otherwise, he's cut off as well. Cade, though, he can miss 11 games left. He has been completely healthy this season, and it's great to have him around. And again, he might end up just messing around and ending up with the MVP just because he has had such a great season and he hasn't missed too much time.
Yeah, that is a really interesting number, Phil. I think I think you and I could both agree. All of those guys will probably garner more votes just on the fact that their names are quote unquote bigger. Their teams have had success for longer. They're in bigger markets, et cetera, et cetera. But if all of those guys miss more time, I think Cade is. I think he's the guy you have to give it to.
Right.
I know there's been a lot of talk about Jaylen Brown possibly getting the award, and I think he is very deserving of it as well. I think he's done a terrific job really keeping the Celtics not only afloat, but he's kept them thriving. They have not missed a beat at all. But Cade has vaulted the Pistons to the top of the East, and the job he's done cannot be understated. It truly can't. So, and he impacts the game on both ends of the floor. Like, he is a big part of this team's identity, both on offense and defense. So I think he is deserving of the award. I know there are plenty of people who would probably think otherwise and who would say, Shea or Wemby or Jokic or Luka. And all of those guys are great, like I said, in their own right. But no, if Cade gets it, regardless of how many votes he gets, if he does get it, it shouldn't be by default. If these guys do miss time, it'll be because of the fact that one of these guys has truly earned it. And like I said, I think all of these guys could very well be deserving of it. You could make a staunch claim for any of them, but Cade would have my vote today if the season ended.
Right. Now, and I love the Jaylen Brown pick as well because, again, I had no idea that the Celtics would even be as competitive, let alone be second in the Eastern Conference right now. But what Cade is doing and what the Pistons are doing in general cannot be overstated. Again, you just look back 2 years ago. Look at where they are now. He is the catalyst. He is the main reason that they are that way. And, again, when you need him most in some of these big primetime games, when most of the eyes are on him, who's showing out the most? Who's performing the best? It's Cade Cunningham. So, again, I like that idea of him being MVP. I think, like you said, he wouldn't be a default. I think he would definitely deserve it just based off all of the extracurricular activities, kind of involved with picking an MVP, all the other stories that make it a great MVP candidate. I mean, Cade is definitely up there as far as the sort of leaderboard right now for me.
Yeah, he definitely has to be. And I feel like the parameters around the MVP award have changed over the course of the years. They've changed through the duration of our lives. It used to always go to, I felt like, the best player on the best team that season. And I felt like when Russell Westbrook won, and I believe it was 2016, Phil, the year he averaged a triple-double, kind of opened the floodgates for players who had maybe had extraordinary seasons, but that success didn't necessarily translate to wins on paper. Having said that, though, I'm still an advocate for the MVP award. I still love all of the guys who have been awarded the MVP as of late. But I do think Cade is just as deserving, like I said, as anybody because he's been terrific individually, but at the same time, it has directly correlated to team success, a lot of it.
Right, and another guy who was an all-star, Jalen Duren, definitely is benefiting quadruple times maybe than he would with any other player, having Cade Cunningham as his point guard. And he really was sort of the big reason why the Pistons were able to win the game following that next game. They took on the Bulls at Chicago. They won that game by a pretty similar score, 126 to 110 in that one. And Jalen Duren, like I said, had a incredible game. And that when he went for 26 points and 13 rebounds. It was his first game back from that suspension for fighting in Charlotte. Again, when the Pistons can attack you from so many different angles. And really, if you want to know if the Pistons won a game or not, all you have to do is just see how involved Jalen Duren was in the offense. I think when he is scoring the ball and getting plays drawn up specifically for him to score the ball, that means the Pistons are kind of ahead. They are probably dominating a team right now and just kind of allowing Jalen Duren to get some extra touches. So if he's having a big game, you got to think that Detroit in general is having a big game.
Yeah, for sure. He's the anchor of this team right now. I mean, everything really runs through him inside and out. Cade is obviously, like I said, the engine that makes this team go, but I really do feel like Duren is the guy who's really holding things together on in so many different aspects. But Phil, he's come such a long way. Offensively, his game is just continue to expand. I don't think people realize how it takes an extraordinary type of skill set to be able to make the shots that he does on a nightly basis, off the glass, with both hands, fadeaway jumpers, off the baseline, right above the block. It's extraordinary, and it's just been terrific to see.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's talk about this last game that, again, was another primetime game. It was a lot of fun to watch. I don't think the final score in this one really tells just how close this game was or how competitive it was. They did take on the San Antonio Spurs. They lost that game 114 to 103. Again, 11-point loss, but that really felt close all throughout. Detroit started out, I believe they were down 12-0 at one point, or 12-1 or something like that to open up the game. And then they managed to come back, take the lead, and then it was back and forth really all game long. And we know that they haven't played the Pistons. We know that they haven't played Oklahoma City, which is currently the top team in the Western Conference right now. But you got to think that the Spurs are right up there with OKC as far as being the top team out west. This kind of felt like a finals preview a little bit. I don't want to jump any guns. I'm knocking on wood right now. I don't want to jinx anything for the Pistons, but just the atmosphere, how competitive it was. I mean, Jalen Duren picked up 2 quick fouls. Cade Cunningham picked up 2 quick fouls. Something you definitely don't want to see, but that just goes to show that Detroit was taking this very seriously, and you also saw some tempers flare on San Antonio's side too, meaning that they also kind of acknowledged just how big this game really was.
Yeah, this was a pivotal game for both sides. This is a really good late season matchup. I felt like both sides understood, I think, the parameters around this game and what it means moving forward. Phil, I said last week or the week before, I didn't foresee this as a finals matchup or a preview of that.
Right.
As for this upcoming season, this upcoming postseason. But both of these teams are playing at a really high level. And if they make it to the finals, this is going to be really, really fun. But I thought Detroit did as best as it could under the circumstances. Like I said, they got into foul trouble. I do think San Antonio obviously landed the first punch, which just came back to haunt them. The Pistons have always been the aggressor. They've always prided themselves on that throughout the course of the season. But I think we also saw some of those concerns that we've had throughout the year were exacerbated in that game. The Pistons still are in desperate need of a secondary ball handler, a guy who can really make plays when Cade is either off the ball or when he's not in the game. And then on top of that, the Pistons shot 7 of 36 from 3, Phil. 7 of 36. And we've continued to talk about how three-pointers have been just a recurring issue. As good as you are defensively, as good as you are in the paint, you still have to be able to make threes and knock down shots when games get tight. And Detroit was unable to do that last night. San Antonio was 18 of 40 from 3. And I can't say enough about all of the guards the Spurs have surrounded Victor Wembanyama with. And the crazy thing is, too, is that we talk about the quote in basketball of giving to get back more. I think the Spurs have really continued to just identify with that over the last quarter century, but especially with this new unit that they have, because De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, and Dylan Harper, all of those guys are terrific in their own right. They're all great scorers. They all have really high skill sets, but they're super unselfish.
Yeah.
They're all playing with their role within the team, and they all knock down shots. They all play a lot of defense. It's been remarkable to see. So San Antonio's dangerous. They are very dangerous, and we always talk about steps to success, Phil, but the Spurs have hit the accelerator.
When you've got Wemby, I mean, he probably walks up entire flights of stairs. He doesn't need to take each step.
There are no steps. So I don't. It's going to be interesting to see how teams game plan against the Spurs in the West, because they are really, really difficult to stop. And Wemby's going to just have some bad nights. He's going to have some nights where he's not as effective. But I don't know how you not only stop him, but contain all of their guards. It's kind of like a pick your poison situation. Right. So whatever they do, though, Detroit should be paying close attention, not only for this season, but the years ahead, because the Spurs, I think, are going to be the team to beat sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I felt like until the Pistons kind of found themselves in foul trouble, I thought Jalen Duren did a really good job kind of. You can't stop Victor Wembanyama. Right. I mean, there is no stopping him, but trying to contain him a little bit, giving them, some extra muscle, because he's just so big. It's really difficult to keep him out of the paint, kind of draw him out of there. I mean, he had 6 blocks in this game. I mean, he was all over the place defensively as well. You got to think, though, that Isaiah Stewart coming back from suspension during the next matchup, which is coming up against the Spurs. It'll be happening early next month as well. We'll talk about that again a little bit later, too. But, I mean, with that coming up, you got to think having an Isaiah Stewart to come in for Jalen Duren in case maybe he gets into foul trouble again kind of early, that changes things. Paul Reed did a fantastic job when he had to come in, but again, when you are out one of your big guys and a guy who gets a lot of minutes and a key contributor like Isaiah Stewart, you got to think that having him back in the lineup probably changes things a little bit. Maybe even makes it a little bit closer. I'm not saying they flat out win and beat the Spurs, but you got to think it changes the final score at least a little bit.
Yeah, and for sure. And I think also, too, this was a good dose of reality for Isaiah Stewart and the rest of this team. If I'm JB Bickerstaff, I'm going back to Isaiah Stewart at the end of that game and saying, hey, we needed you. We needed you. This is another example and another reminder of why it's important to not lose your temper, why it's important to not rack up technical fouls throughout the course of the year, because all of that stuff, it compounds. And this team really could have used Isaiah Stewart. He is a difference maker in every sense of the word on the basketball court, especially when there's a really talented big man on the other end.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's talk about the kind of gauntlet, like I said, that the Pistons are in the midst of. Again, just looking at those last 3 games to kick off the All-Star break, those are tough matchups. They were able to go 2-1, which is good to see if you're a Pistons fan. But upcoming, this is the next week of games. They've got Oklahoma City. Again, we're finally going to see the Pistons and Thunder finally square off. Yeah. Then they have to go play at home against the Cleveland Cavaliers, another top Eastern Conference team that is really starting to find their stride now with James Harden in the lineup. Then they have to go to Orlando to take on a Magic team that, again, is also dealing with injuries and maybe not as good as some of us may have thought they would be in the offseason. But again, a team that can catch you sleeping and a team that will probably be in the playoffs. And we'll talk about it again next week too. But then they have to go back to Cleveland, and then they have to take on the Spurs. So again, this is another 5-game stretch after this 3-game stretch. This is 8 straight games of great competition that you're really starting to see what the Pistons are all about.
Yeah, this is a critical stretch for Detroit, because not only do you need to get a rhythm for the postseason, but you have to stay atop the East. The Pistons have been at the top. You don't want to lose the first seed because you had a bad stretch near the end of the year. You don't want that. And so things are about to get a lot more difficult. But this is a good test for a team that is looking to go very far in the postseason. Like you said, Cleveland is starting to find its groove. Harden has really thrown a wrench, I think, in what they're doing. Now, all of a sudden, I think the Cavaliers are very confident about possibly making it all the way to the finals. And I think they were at the start of the season, but I think this move right now is proven to be very beneficial for them. So, yeah, the Pistons are going to have a lot of work to do over these next few games, but I think JB Bickerstaff has done a really good job of making sure that the guys only focus on what's in front of them.
Right.
Don't get too far ahead of yourself. Don't worry about the playoffs. Don't worry about 10 games out. Just focus on winning tonight. And so if they can continue to just embody that mindset and do what they've continued to do all season, continue to play defense, play hard, stay out of foul trouble, make shots when they matter, I think they'll be all right.
Right, yeah, just looking at the standings right now. So Detroit currently has a 5-game lead over the Boston Celtics, who are in second place. But like we've been saying, the Cleveland Cavaliers are coming. They're only 2 games out of second place right now. Yeah. So again, that 2 through 5 right now, could go any sort of way. You've got the Celtics, Knicks, Cavs, and Raptors, another surprising team too.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about the end of the season, because there's always a team, and I think the Spurs are that in the Western Conference right now. The Spurs are really catching their stride at the perfect time. And so it seems like Cleveland might be on its way to doing that in the East. And if so, the Pistons are going to have some work to do to hold them off.
Yeah. All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about something that the Pistons thankfully don't have to really worry about right now, and that is the issue with tanking going on in the NBA right now. We heard from NBA Commissioner Adam Silver back around the All-Star break saying that was going to be the league's #1 priority, is trying to fix teams from tanking. And just as a bit of an educational course for everybody, tanking is basically, if you don't know, it's basically when these teams kind of put in lineups that maybe aren't the best. They're letting guys rest a little bit more, maybe not playing them in hopes of, in turn, actually losing games to get a better chance at a higher draft pick in the upcoming NBA draft, to help kind of expedite a rebuild for a team. So you see a lot of teams that are kind of middling below 500 doing this, but again, there are some teams that, maybe have been dealing with some injuries this year and are kind of going that route a little bit. And we heard from Adam Silver again saying that this is something that he wants to fix, and he's open to a bunch of different ideas, whether it's suspending guys, suspending front offices, fining teams, taking away draft picks. There are so many different things, but again, there is the issue of the fact that a lot of these teams are just flat out bad, and maybe they're not necessarily trying to lose. I could speak, for my Memphis Grizzlies right now, that the team around him, it's just not really great right now. Sure. They could surprise some people, and they are playing well, but you got to think that this team just isn't good enough to win a game or, beat some of these top teams. And again, I think the question we want to start off with before we maybe talk about ways that we could fix tanking is, do you have a problem with tanking, AJ?
That's a loaded question, Bill. I have a problem with it when it is repetitive for an extended period of time.
Right.
I think what the Philadelphia 76ers did ahead of drafting Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, before landing those picks ahead of that, I thought those few years in Philly were just catastrophic.
Right.
I thought it was awful. It kills the fan base, and it kills the interest of fans who want to come to the game and who expect to see a good product on the floor night in and night out. Having said that, like we've talked about, Phil, you need resources to compete. And a lot of those resources have to come by way of draft picks. There are just so many small markets. The Pistons have been one for an extended period of time, really in their entire existence. There's so many small markets that have to draft well in order to build a team that can compete.
Right.
You're not going to land a shark. Most of the sharks, most of the biggest free agents end up in the same locations: New York, Los Angeles, maybe Miami, and so forth. So I do not have a problem with it when when I feel there's a strategy behind it.
Right.
And obviously when you're trying to also actively build behind the scenes, because that's what happens too. The Pistons were building behind the scenes for far longer than people could have expected. All of this did not just come together overnight, the way that I think many people have portrayed it to be. But having said that, though, like we talked about, you need draft picks. And so I don't have a problem with the teams that are trying to get ahead for this draft. I can't blame them for that. I don't think anyone can. And I don't think it would be fair or reasonable for the commissioner or anyone else to say, well, that's wrong, because that's what so many teams have had to do to stay afloat. Having said that, when you're doing it for 3, 4, or sometimes even 2 seasons in a row, and you are just objectively bad, and it's deliberate, when you're constantly trying to move the best players out of your arena for the sake of draft picks, then you might have some trouble. I do not feel like there's really anyone in the league right now that is abusing tanking in the way that other teams in the past have. I think there are some teams who are making an effort to be bad right now so they can lose as many games as possible so they can get a draft pick. But I don't think there's anyone that's been trying to do it for years on end now to the point where fans or anyone can say, okay, I'm fully sick of this. There's a difference between being objectively bad and then trying to be objectively bad, if that makes sense, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you worded it perfectly, is the fact that we can't fault these teams just because they are trying to make themselves better in the future. I think there's nothing wrong with, say, maybe taking a season off. I mean, I'm not accusing the Indiana Pacers of doing anything like that, but you got to think, once they found out that Tyrese Halliburton was going to be out for the entire year, you kind of take things back and think, okay, well, we know we can't win an NBA Finals without Tyrese Halliburton. And nobody, even though they just went to the Finals, nobody in their right mind, even Pacers fans, would say that they could do that without Tyrese Halliburton, even if maybe they got a good backup point guard to kind of fill in those shoes. Nobody was thinking that they were going to do that. So again, are they, tanking for them makes a little bit more sense because they can reload a little bit.
And also, too, going off of that, Phil, we talked about this off air this morning. I don't think the Pacers expected to be as bad as they maybe have been this year. But when you get to a point where you're not having much success at all, you have to reassess the direction of not only this season, but the ones ahead. And so if you can get a legitimate top draft pick, a lottery pick, you're going to do it, or at least going to try to. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, because you're only doing it for one season. And if I'm a Pacers fan, I'm still just as excited to see the team next year as I would be or would have been last season. In fact, I'd probably be a little more excited because this team is going to have another lottery pick probably.
Right. Well, and I get like the whole issue with tanking is you don't want teams to, take their gas off the pedal and basically just say, hey, this game doesn't matter. It's already been decided or anything like that. But I mean, even some of these teams that are kind of in the midst of this tanking talk right now, you think about teams like the Pacers, who I just said, the Wizards, the Jazz. I mean, I haven't watched too many Wizards or Jazz or Pacers games, but the games that I have watched, I mean, they're competitive at least. You've got these guys that maybe aren't the most skilled guys in the NBA. They're at least getting they're putting their heart out there. They're at least trying. And so the games are at least competitive, whether it be for just the first half or the first 3 quarters or really up until the very end, A lot of these games are closer than people may think. And then you, of course, get those really fun games when you've got 2 tanking teams kind of going against each other. And then they kind of battle it out a little bit more. You also touched on it a little bit. I think of a team like OKC, who just hung on and just kept collecting draft picks. I mean, there was about a 2 or 3 year stretch when they looked really bad, but they were just able to kind of keep accumulating these picks and everything like that. And look at them now; they're NBA champions. They're the best team in the NBA right now. I mean, it clearly works. So I don't think it's fair for the NBA to just flat out say you're not allowed to do this thing that has clearly worked for other teams. Just because OKC isn't doing it now doesn't mean that they didn't do it and they got off scot-free.
Right, and I think the Wizards are a bit of a different situation from what the Jazz are doing right now. It's a little different. I think that's the only way I can categorize it. But listen, the Wizards have won less than 35 games for the last 7 straight seasons, and this will probably be year 8 of that. I don't think they have been tanking the entire time.
No, right.
I don't think so. I think things have just happened, and as a result of that, they have performed poorly. I really do. There have been multiple regime changes. There have been coaching changes, and there's been a structural change within the organization in and of itself. So, and if anyone needs any other indication outside of this team actively trying to get better, you have to look no further than the trade deadline. This is a team that went out and got Trae Young and Anthony Davis. Mm-hmm. They're going to try to compete next season.
Absolutely.
Not to mention they have Alex Sarr and a lot of other talented young players waiting in the wings. So I don't think they're tanking. I think this season maybe they're making an effort to try and get a draft pick this year, but I would not say, or I would not go as far to say that they have been tanking for the last 4, 5, 6 seasons. I don't buy that. And like I said, if a team is trying to lose games right now, or if they're okay with losing games right now to position themselves for a draft pick and what is going to be a historic draft class more than likely.
I was about to say that, yeah.
I can't fault them for that. The Utah thing is a little interesting. I don't think we have ever seen a team sit its players in the 4th quarter, Phil.
Yeah.
That's a little different. But at the same time, can you blame them?
Right. And I think that is another thing that Adam Silver has wanted to kind of tackle is the fact that some of these teams are just saying, all right, load management was always the big thing. We're giving guys the night off. And, it was maybe a game that they could have won, but they decided to sit some of their top guys and probably lost that game. With teams like the Jazz, I mean, they're playing their guys. So, again, I think the issue of, a fan, because that's the example that is always given, a fan that saves up all their money, they can only go to 1 game a year, they finally get to go and they don't get to see their favorite players. Teams like the Jazz aren't doing that. You at least get to see some of your favorite guys. Now, again, if you are a Jazz fan, you probably don't like the end of the game, but at the same time, you're still getting that NBA experience, I guess, a little bit.
You are for sure. I don't understand the league's anger or frustration with this at this particular time. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what exactly this is about, but obviously I think this has maybe been brewing for quite some time, and I think the league is just trying to send an overall message of, hey, this shouldn't be a plan. But at the same time, Phil, a small market team is a small market team,
right?
And there are ugly depths that you have to go to sometimes to get what you want on the other end of that. Mm-hmm. That's just how professional sports has worked.
Right. And are we going to keep punishing, fining, or maybe taking away draft picks for these smaller market teams, which is kind of the only way that they're even able to do that? So, and with this draft class coming up, again, I don't really think you could really fault anybody. And I also really liked what the NBA did a couple seasons ago, and that was making the bottom 3 teams, the teams with the 3 worst records in the NBA, they all have the same odds of winning the NBA lottery for that number 1 pick. I thought that was a genius idea. I figured, you know what, if you're not a lottery team and maybe you were tanking like that, well, just know that, you're going to have the same odds as maybe the 3rd best team in the league. So maybe you only won 12 games. Maybe the 3rd best team was a little bit more competitive. Maybe they got close to 30. They're going to have the same sort of percentage to possibly get that first overall pick. And we've even seen teams, Detroit fans kind of know this a little bit more too. They are likely to get a top pick and then they end up, 5 or 6 picks back. So again, it's all really a crapshoot. Honestly, I wish there was a better word I could have used there, but it really is. I mean, there's just things that can go wrong and things that can go right for you, whether you tank or not.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't always work. And even if you are trying to tank to get a few really high quality draft picks, you still have to build the rest of your team.
Absolutely.
Like the Pistons have done a terrific job, but all of these guys haven't come by way of the draft, and they definitely haven't arrived in Detroit off of picks that the Pistons have just straight up tanked for. That has not been the case. There have been a lot of timely signings, and there's been hirings and firings. So there's a lot more that goes into building a successful team outside of tanking.
Right.
But having said that, if there's a team that puts that into their strategy for a year or two, especially if they're a small market team that's been through the ringer, I can't fault them for that, Phil. I can't. And this might be wrong of me, but I don't think the league should fault them for that either, unless it's absolutely brutal.
Right.
But I don't think there's been a brutal case of that this season.
No.
I don't.
No, I don't think so either. And I would even venture to say that this has been one of the more competitive seasons, I feel like. I mean, there are obviously teams that are kind of towards the bottom, but I can't think of, of any big blowouts that people are kind of, raving about. Detroit beat the Knicks by, I think, 30 the other night. Are we saying the Knicks are tanking right now? I mean, that's just what I think. There's too much gray area in this conversation to be had than for Adam Silver to just say we need to punish these teams that are playing that, because again, there's so many different factors.
No, and there's a ridiculous amount of talent in the league. Every team right now has at least one guy that I think the average basketball fan would pay to go see. I really do believe that. And so I think that's another indicator of teams not tanking. If those teams were tanking, then why would they have those players to begin with?
Right.
But there's a big difference, like I said, between tanking and just performing poorly.
Right.
And I think right now the league is having the latter problem. I really do. I think they are struggling with some teams that are maybe not doing their best and that are looking to compensate off of that.
Yeah.
But like I said, I can't blame those teams, Phil. I'll continue to say it. These are small market franchises we're talking about. What are they supposed to do? And also, too, if you take away the picks, you're kind of adding to the problem. Because now those teams really have nothing to build.
Right. Now they're just bad. They're not even trying to be bad.
So what are you going to tell them to do? You're going to tell them to go make trades? Well, make trades with what picks?
Right.
Draft who? With what picks? You're going to tell them to go out and sign free agents? Well, who's coming to such and such market? When's the last time such and such market landed a shark?
Right.
So I'm not too sure why the league is so upset about this. But like I said, I think it's a storm that's been brewing for quite some time. I do hope they figure out a plan.
Right.
I just hope that it's not as bad as it looks right now.
Right. Well, why is the decision or kind of the route that they're trying to go on, why is it to punish these teams instead of maybe trying to figure out a way to help these teams out, these smaller market teams? Why are we so focused on making sure that teams like LA, Boston, New York, these Chicago, these top teams, that they've got all the resources, they've got all the ability, they've got all the appeal for free agents and everything like that. Why is the move not to maybe say, hey, Sacramento, what's wrong? Why what can we do to make Sacramento a more appealing destination for people, or something like that? Why is it always we got to take away instead of maybe adding something?
Yeah, for sure. And this would be an interesting time to try that as well, because I do feel like it's really cool now for a lot of players to play for small market teams. Anthony Edwards has made the Minnesota Timberwolves cool again.
Absolutely.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has made the Thunder cool again. There are kids all across the world that are dreaming of playing for these teams. Not the Lakers, not the Knicks, not the Bulls, not the Heat. Kids still dream of playing for those teams too. But all of a sudden, you have some really small market franchises that have global popularity.
Right.
And so I think the league could benefit off of that, what you said, Phil.
All right. Well, all great stuff really about tanking. I think we can all kind of agree that we don't necessarily agree with, where the NBA is coming from about this sort of issue, quote unquote issue. But I think it'll be interesting to see which route they go, because if there's one thing that we know about Adam Silver is that he's going to be sort of changing directions. He loves kind of changing course and mixing things up a little bit, whether it's the All-Star game or MVP votings or really anything else.
Yeah, he's a very innovative but unpredictable leader. But
Right.
I think he's always done what's best for the league, and I think he'll continue to do so, with this included.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's switch gears again. And again, we just got off the Winter Olympics. It was so much fun watching all the different games, especially the two hockey teams, the men's and women's USA teams, taking home the gold medal after beating Canada in their respective gold medal matches. And obviously, it was great to see some of the top guys in the NHL all kind of come together and win a gold medal like that, especially over some other really top guys in the NHL on the Canada side. But that got me thinking, and this is why we want to do it today, because we're just a little over 2 years out from the 2028 Summer Olympics. We figured why not pick our sort of predictions on who we think is going to be making the team for Team USA. We've got a couple of guys who are returning from the 2024 Olympic squad, but also a bunch of new faces, because you got to think a lot of those guys that were on the team last year, you think Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, they had been there for multiple Olympics. Steph Curry, that was his first one, but they've been in the league for quite some time. Steph Curry, for example, he's going to be 40 in the 2028 Olympics. I don't know if he's going to necessarily want to play. LeBron James, he'll probably be 50 at that point, so I doubt he'll want to be there. But again, we do have a couple of returning faces. AJ, why don't you give us some of the returning faces? Who do you've got coming back on this USA team?
For sure, yeah. So the returners that I have are Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bam Adebayo, and Tyrese Halliburton.
Okay.
I think Kevin Durant is probably the one maybe the least likely to come back, just given the fact that he's a bit older. But he said he intends to play. And I think if his body's still holding up, he can still get the job done just as well as anybody. There's a different set of rules, and I think a different kind of sacrifice you have to make when you're playing Olympic basketball, especially for the U.S. And I think Kevin Durant has always done a really good job of keeping things balanced, and he would definitely be a much-needed leader on this roster. And then I think the rest of these guys, they'll be in somewhat of the primes of their careers by this point. So I think all of those guys have a really, really solid chance of making the team and will all bring something unique, coupled with the fact that they'll bring another gold medal with them.
Yeah, no, again, I love those picks because, again, you got to think that the Team USA, especially during maybe a transitional year when a lot of those guys that had become familiar faces with the Olympic team, they're going to be stepping aside now and kind of bringing in this new wave. So, again, I only have 4 returning guys, but I think you might be right. It's a little bit closer to 6. And, again, this is no disrespect to Tyrese Halliburton. I would love to see him, but I think, after suffering an Achilles injury like that, maybe he's focused solely on the NBA aspect. He already has a gold medal. He doesn't really... maybe doesn't want another one. And Bam is another one. I think, he's a guy who helped Team USA a lot, but I do think that maybe they will be looking for bringing up some other younger talent potentially to fill in that role. But again, I think Anthony Edwards definitely going to be back there. I think he is slowly ascending into superstardom. He was already a star, but I think this is the next step for him, is being kind of one of those leaders on the Olympic team. Again, he kind of took a backseat to some of those older guys last year, but again, I think he's going to be one, if not the top guy on that team. Jason Tatum hopefully will be getting a little bit of redemption after not really getting a whole lot of playing time on the USA team. He's another guy coming off an injury, but I think he's got something left to prove. I think joining him on the team would be a huge addition. Devin Booker, I mean, we talked a lot about it, how much we both love Devin Booker. And he was a huge part of the 2024 team. So I think, he's still a younger guy. Getting him in the mix, he's that good kind of bridge guy that you've got to have there. And then KD. Obviously, he's going to be older once 2028 hits, but he is the all-time scorer in U.S. Olympic history. I think he's going to want to add yet another. I mean, we heard it in the Netflix documentary on this team that he lives and breathes basketball. That's all he wants to do. So I think, maybe even if he retires, I don't think Team USA would be against maybe just bringing him on to the team and just even giving him, a few games here and there. I mean, you're going to need a guy who's as clutch as he is and a guy who can get a bucket anytime that he can like that.
For sure, yeah. I think Kevin Durant is a lot of what Carmelo probably was in those latter years of the Olympics, which was he not only is a terrific shooter, but he sort of encapsulates what it's all about, which is sacrifice.
Right.
This is a guy who is as good of a scorer as there has ever been and as probably as there ever will be, and he's still going to be willing to do whatever it takes for the betterment of the team. So I think he'll be a vital asset for this team if he elects to play and if he's healthy enough to do so.
Definitely. All right. Well, I want to, since I've got a couple more extra guys on my list right now, I'm going to go ahead and just shout out a name. We'll kind of go back and forth, AJ, on just who else we think we would want to see on this team. One guy I think would be great, and again, kind of filling in that Bam Adebayo role, and that would be Evan Mobley, reigning Defensive Player of the Year for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I like his size. I think something that also is going to play a big role in this is maybe finding guys that kind of match up well against other teams that they're going to be playing in the Olympics, namely being France. So you want to have a guy who can defend, a guy like Victor Wembanyama, slow him down as much as you can, maybe take on a team like Serbia with Nikola Jokic as well. So I think, defense is really going to be the key there. I don't think Anthony Davis is going to be coming back. We don't know what's the deal with Joel Embiid either. I like Evan Mobley there, a guy who's always ready to play and a guy who's really defensive focused and, understands his role. And it's not going to be kind of, all right, well, it's my turn to touch the basketball now. I feel like that is something that that we run into a lot during the Olympics.
Yes, the center position is going to be a critical one for Team USA. You mentioned the talented centers that there are across the world. If we're being quite honest, Phil, I think that might be the most thin position for Team USA. So, yeah, Evan Mobley is one of those great ones. I think he'll be a terrific option for the team if he ends up making Team USA. But they're going to need someone who is really assertive and who's willing to do all of the dirty work. Somebody who's not really, like you said, worried about getting their touches or scoring or any of that, because you can get scoring from anyone on this roster. That's what this group is going to be made up of. I think we know that is certain. But somebody who can defend in the paint, somebody who can set hard screens, somebody who can get around screens, somebody who can switch onto screens on the perimeter, those are all things that are question marks right now. And you're going to need answers for those if you want to capture a gold medal. So I think Evan Mobley is a terrific option there.
And you also had Evan Mobley on your list, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I have him on there. I think, like I said, I think he just brings so much to the table. And on top of that, he does have a really strong offensive skill set. So if you do need to go down to him, you can, but I think he'll do everything else.
Right. Yeah. No, again, I think this is, we've seen it in a couple of interviews post-Olympics, but I think that is the key that they always try to do. It's totally different. FIBA rules totally different than the NBA. Olympic basketball totally different than even playoff basketball. There's different things that you kind of have to equate. You don't necessarily say, hey, let's pick the 12 best guys that we can and put them on a team and just hope for the best. I mean, those days are gone. You need guys that kind of mend well together. And that kind of leads me to these next two guys that we also kind of agreed on, two Detroit Pistons guys that we, again, would love to see. And that's Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren. Again, that just their chemistry alone would, kind of mean a lot for this team, I feel like, in the offensive game, the pick and roll, everything like that. But then they're both great at their positions. And you touched on it. The center position is a little lacking right now as far as, when I was going through Team USA and potential players to pick, he would probably be my starter, if I'm being honest, for the Olympics. I think he would be the guy to kind of put out there and against like a Nikola Jokic or a Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, and I think he would definitely bring the type of selflessness that's needed, because he sort of already embodies that in his job as a Piston right now. That's what he does. Like, on top of all the scoring and the rebounding, he's a guy who does a lot of the grunt work for this team, him and Isaiah Stewart. So I think he would be ready, willing, and able to do that throughout the whole entire Olympics. And Cade is a phenomenal playmaker. I think Cade could possibly start in the Olympics.
I do too.
I think he's that good. And I think with the globalization of basketball and with so many teams putting an emphasis on size and skill, they're going to need a lot of guys who can really just, I think, lead and run around the floor and be switchable and play positionless basketball like we've talked about. And I don't think there's a better place to start than with a 6'7" point guard who has an innate ability to make any kind of read on the floor that you need. And Cade does that. He does that night in and night out. And I think he's a very selfless player in his own right. I think Cade is not going to be concerned with scoring at all. No. He's going to make a lot of guys better. I think he could be a lot of what Tyrese Halliburton was in his role, and what so many other great floor generals have been, what Chris Paul was for the 08 team. I think Cade could definitely be that for Team USA in 2028.
Yeah. Could you imagine a Cade and Duren starting lineup for the Olympics. That would be Detroit would go crazy over that. That would be awesome to see.
It's a strong possibility, Phil.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the end of all of the guys that we have in common on this list. AJ, who's the next guy that you are excited to bring to Team USA?
Yeah, so one guy that I have is Tyrese Maxey. I think, Phil, you mentioned Anthony Edwards taking that leap to superstardom. I think Maxey is taking that same step as we speak. But I think he's the type of guy who will bring a lot of energy. He scores in so much of a variety. He gets buckets all over the floor, but I think he'll also bring a certain level of toughness on the defensive end as well. I know he's a bit of a smaller guard, but I think he can really disrupt games and just impact things on both sides of the floor. But he's, I think, the kind of microwave scorer that Team USA could really need. He's a guy who can get you a few buckets off the pick and rolls and fast break opportunities. So he's somebody that I'm optimistic about making Team USA.
Yeah, I would love to see Tyrese Maxey. I mean, he's also kind of used to playing in red, white, and blue with the Philadelphia 76ers. But like you said, there are very few guys that can get hot as fast or as quickly or as dominant as Tyrese Maxey can. I feel like once he sees a couple of balls go through the hoop, I mean, the hoop is 80 feet wide at that point. So, and there have been so many great moments. I think of like Carmelo back in 08 hitting all those threes. Steph Curry in the last Olympics. I mean, there are those Olympic moments that are etched in history from guys just getting hot at the right time and not missing those heat checks and everything like that. He would be a guy up there. Anthony Edwards, another one, but I think Tyrese Maxey maybe even a little bit more too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the important thing to keep in mind when building, I think, an Olympic team is what can these guys do but in a smaller setting? Like what makes them most special, and then how can they bring that amongst a bunch of guys who are also a future Hall of Famers. So I think Maxey in his own right is a microwave scorer through and through, and I think that's a skill set that translates easily.
All right, well, I want to talk about two younger guys, because that was kind of the big issue I had when I was filling out this roster, is I was saying, okay, this upcoming draft class, there are a lot of really talented guys. Could they be ready in, say, 2 years, or maybe even some of the guys, you know, it was difficult to decide, and I decided to kind of just to hedge my bets a little bit. I said, if you are a rookie this year, then you can possibly make it to the team. I don't think there's going to be enough time. I could be very wrong. I mean, these upcoming guys, they're pretty good. There's a chance that they could also make the team. But two young guys that I think have a really good shot at making the team. Stephon Castle of the San Antonio Spurs, we just saw what he's capable of. And again, kind of that guy that can score at all three phases of the game. And then also Cooper Flagg. I mean, there were all those talks during the last Olympics that Cooper Flagg was one of the best players, period, during those practice sessions. He wasn't on the team, but he was part of those practices. And people said this was before he even donned a Dallas Mavericks jersey, before he even knew that he was going to be playing for Dallas. And everybody was talking about just how great he was and how NBA ready he was. If that's going to translate into, again, what the Olympics are going to be, I think he's got to make that team.
Yeah, I think Flagg is going to have a strong case for making the squad, Phil. I really do. I mean, he's already been so good. And the Mavericks have had just a slew of troubles, but he has been the lone bright spot. But yeah, he's one of those guys too that I think fits perfectly with the whole idea of positionless basketball. You can put him wherever. You can put him on the wing. You can put him at point in some sets. He's already running point in Dallas. So yeah, I think he'll have a very, very strong case.
Yeah, no, that would be great to see. All right, well, now we've each got three guys left. AJ, who's the next guy on your list?
Yeah, so this guy's a bit of a wild card, but I had Jalen Johnson.
I love that pick. Yeah. I can't believe I didn't think of that.
I mean, he's almost averaging a triple-double this season. I think he fully made the Hawks confident enough to move away from Trae Young and really build around him. But outside of all of that, I think he just has such a unique skill set. Like, he does everything on the floor, and he's another guy who, like I said, fits perfectly with that idea. I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but like he really is another guy who I think just embodies what it means to be like a positionless player in this era. You can put him anywhere on the floor and he finds different ways to be effective. And I think Team USA is going to need as many of those guys as they can get if they want to advance past all of the great teams that there will be.
Yeah, well, I've got another former Duke Blue Devil as my next guy, and that's Paolo Banchero, a guy who, you've touched on it, positionless basketball is going to be key. I mean, it's key right now in the NBA. We talked about it last week in depth, but it's going to be super key in the Olympics. And Paolo is one of those guys, you can put him at the 1, put him at the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5. I mean, he can play any position. He's going to give you great defensive effort and, you know, an offensive skill set. His jump shot is obviously cause for some concern and a lot of jokes online right now, but you know, he's still one of the top I would say 25 guys,
For
20,
sure.
25 guys in the league right now,
Easy.
and a guy that would kind of elevate this team to the next level. A guy that, again, can score at all three phases of the game, give you the defensive effort. And, you know, what we've seen, I mean, even my list right now, I'm looking back at it, I don't have that many centers or even really taller forwards.
Yeah.
And I think if you can, you know, move Paolo in and maybe play 5 in a small ball lineup or even the 4 in a couple of lineups, I mean, that's going to be key for when you're building out this roster.
I think many people forget how big Paolo is. I really do. I felt that way since he was at Duke. His skill set it rivals, I think, the skill sets of some guys who are maybe 6'7" or 6'8".
Right.
But he's like 6'10", 260.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, no, he brings a certain amount of versatility that you just can't replicate. And I do think he has a strong case for making the team, too. I've heard and seen all of these concerns. Paolo's going to be just fine.
Absolutely.
He's got superstar written all over him. He's got a great work ethic.
We've seen it already.
We've seen it already. This is a rough patch. He's a young guy. He's going to be more than fine. Paolo's a guy who could be raising the MVP trophy within the next 5 years.
Right.
He's that good.
Absolutely. All right, who's the next guy you got, AJ?
This guy's another wild card, but we talked about the center position being a little thin. I think Chet Holmgren will have a strong case. He's a defender through and through. He's a rim protector. I think he would really embrace that role, but I think he would also be good too because he could stretch the floor. He can step out and hit threes if you need it. You could put him in some pick and pop situations. I think he'll be mobile, moving around really well, and I think he's continuing to find out how good he can be.
Right.
So I think in 2 years, we could see an entirely different player out of Chet. He could have a couple more rings on his finger, could have a DPOY award, but he's one of those guys I think that would really shine on the game's biggest stage.
Right. now, and then again, Team Canada is probably going to be a lot better this upcoming Olympics. You know, SGA and Chet playing against each other in the Olympics. That could be a lot of fun to watch, too.
Yeah.
All right, next guy on my list, again, another somewhat younger guy, but a guy who has multiple-time All-Star at this point and is leading one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference right now, and that is Scotty Barnes. I love Scotty Barnes. He is just fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like, he just loves the game of basketball.
He does.
And he's definitely, I don't know how much of an impact he might make in the Olympics, but you need those guys, again, like a glue guy, who just brings the fun, who fully embraces the moment. You know, everything is so serious, obviously, when it comes to actually playing in these Olympic Games, but you got to think, you're doing something that very few athletes ever get to do. I mean, you need a guy to really kind of embrace the fun, the antics about it, and also maybe casually drop 20 and 10 pretty easily on an opposing team. That's Scotty Barnes to me. Again, I purely picked him just because I love watching him play basketball.
Yeah, I would love to see what Scotty could do in a reserve role for Team USA. I think he would be terrific. Like, I think he is a game changer in the fact that if he could exert his energy into playing the passing lanes, getting stops, getting rebounds, that's a scary sight.
Very
scary sight for any opposing team. Because like I said, you would have a million other guys to score the ball.
Right.
So he could focus on everything else, and I think he would be perfect for that role.
Right. All right, who's your last guy, AJ?
My last guy, we've talked a little bit about him. He's a superstar. He plays for the Knicks. Jalen Brunson. He's the one and only. He's a floor general through and through. You know, Brunson has taken on, I think, a different role in New York. He's really become like a primary scorer and a really unique one in that. He gets downhill a lot. You know, he's really methodical with how he picks his spots and how he picks and chooses things. But I think at his core, he is a floor general, Phil. We've talked about how impactful he was at Villanova. He makes guys around him better. And one thing you have to say about Brunson, he's a winner. He's a winner through and through. And so I think he's the kind of guy that this team could really use, and I think he would help build a really great culture for Team USA in 2028. I don't think he would be concerned with scoring. I think he'd be concerned with distributing the ball, getting guys into their sets. Similar to what I said about Cade being sort of a Chris Paul type of player. I think he could really bring that role to Team USA. But he's a guy that I'm pretty optimistic about making the team just based on the fact that, like I said, he makes everyone better around him and he wins. He just finds different ways to win. And I don't think, even with him having taken on this superstardom role, I don't think he's concerned with getting his. I still don't. I think he's just concerned about the betterment of the team at the end of the day.
So that point guard room is Tyrese Halliburton, Cade Cunningham, and Jalen Brunson. I don't even know who you start. You might just have to start all three of them, honestly.
I mean, you know, these are guys that I threw out that I think have a really strong chance to make the team.
Absolutely.
You know, obviously, knock on wood, but health is going to be a really big indicator in all of this. So who knows who will be healthy when the summertime of 2028 rolls around. But these are guys that I feel strongly about as of right now.
Yeah, no, I love that. My last guy on the list, I kind of cheated, I'm not going to lie. I wrote Thompson twin.
Yeah, you chose two.
I did not know who, the decision makers behind Team USA might prefer. Obviously, Amen Thompson has gotten a lot of national attention, I feel like, for being on the Rockets. But Asar, I mean, he has played great for Detroit, and he is a huge reason, on top of JB Bickerstaff, Jalen Duren, all these other guys. I mean, he is another guy that came in and has kind of helped turn this team around. So I didn't want to pick one of them. I would love to see Asar play. Again, you'd have 3 Pistons there, but again, one of those guys has got to get on because they are just a unique skill set. They both play just slightly differently, but it's all about getting in the passing lanes, getting those steals, playing perimeter defense, playing post defense if they have to, getting blocks. I mean, just doing, again, all the little things. And I always say that you got to have the star power, but you also need those guys that are going to do every little thing in the Olympics.
Every little thing. Yeah, those guys are game changers. They not only do all of the big things, but they do a lot of little things that show up on the box score. I think they both have a really good ability to affect offenses without necessarily taking away from anything. They're not guys who, of course, they get their fair share of blocks and steals, but they're the kinds of guys who make you think twice before you take a jumper, or that make you alter your shot while you're in the middle of a jumper. Like, they both have a really good tendency to do that, and they both pick up on tendencies and little small things really, really well. But having said that, I think Amen will probably get the nod, just given the fact that I think he's a little bit closer to stardom right now. Plus, I think he's playing a bit of a bigger role for Houston. He's playing point right now, and he's really turned some heads. So, but either of those guys will be terrific options too.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I had a lot of fun with that. I think we need to start, pretending that we're GMs of some of these teams a little bit more often. But again, we're still ways away from the Olympics, but it's just fun to go ahead and look ahead, because the Olympics, that's one of my favorite events in all of sports is Olympic basketball. Just, the pride for everybody's country, and, the skill levels that you see. And you end up finding new guys that play for some of these other countries as well. They end up coming here to play in the NBA just from, what they're able to do in the Olympic Games. So it's going to be a really fun time. We're super excited about it. And it's been a busy week. I mean, this is an hour-long episode of NB8, so we hope that everybody enjoys all of the content that we have for you today. We, of course, will be back again next week. For Phil Pinarski and AJ Evans, I want to thank everybody so much for tuning into this latest edition of NB8. We'll see you again next time.